There's a very powerful saying that says success leaves clues. So if you're someone who's interested in having success in self-storage, you are in the right place right now. Welcome to the Self-Storage Report. I'm your host, Chris Berg, Head of Business Development for Abernathy Holdings. Joining me today, as always, co-host Thaddeus Campbell, Head of Biz Dev at S3 Partners. Thaddeus, great to see you. And very excited to introduce our special guest today, CEO of Trojan Storage, already sold part of a portfolio for $245 million. And now the co-owner of QuikStor as well, going to be the premier self-storage management software, Brett Henry. Brett, thanks for the time. It's great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
I want to jump in right away, Brett, just with your story and just talk about the why and the how. And the why is obviously why self-storage, but the how that I want you to jump into as well is your story talks about you started managing 12 sites, ended up raising that NOI by 35%. How'd you do it?
Yeah, I wanted to be a developer when I graduated college, and like everybody, I just fell into self-storage. I got a job. I was working in the operations department of a kind of a 1974, early adopter of self-storage, and I realized very quickly that there was losses on their books, and so 6 of their 12 managers were stealing. It was a substantial amount of money. They were stealing credit cards, checks, cash. And it'd been going on for years and years and years. And so that was kind of my first jump in. I remember meeting with the owner for the first time at Houston's in Manhattan Beach with all my spreadsheets of like all the money that was missing. And so, I quickly got promoted in that company, and it gave me an opportunity to really take kind of an absentee owner portfolio and say, why aren't we raising prices? Why aren't we fixing roofs? Why aren't we painting doors? Why aren't we making this nicer for people and charging a higher price? And so it allowed me to really spend, 7 years running someone else's portfolio and taking something that was kind of neglected and bringing it back. And there were premier locations. It sold a couple of years ago. Extra Space now owns it. And it was really, changed my thinking that I really wasn't a developer like I wanted to be. I was really an operations person. I really wanted to be in the numbers and finding anomalies and what made sense and what didn't. And that's what really kind of led to the founding of Trojan Storage.
And so then were those 12 properties, those 12 assets, part of that $245 million portfolio
No,
sale?
no,
Okay.
those were somebody else's. We started Trojan with my partner John Coetzee in 2007. I've known John forever. I'm a couple years younger, but same high school, college, got family friends, and so we set out with the thought that there was all these mom and pop owners that were charging, 50 cents in a market where, public storage was getting $1.25. And by the way, the focus was on occupancy. Whenever you ask someone about their storage facility 25 years ago and there really wasn't third-party management, everybody would just brag and say, well, I'm 95% occupied. But 95% occupied at 50 cents or 95% occupied at $1.25. And so we set off to go buy value add storages. Our first deal, we tried to rate lock with Wells Fargo in September of 2007, and they didn't call us back because they were firing their subprime division. And so we bought that first property, and then maybe one or two a year for the next 6 or 7 years. We got up to 15. We spent about $75 million, and we sold it to a private group in 2016 for about $245 million.
So if you don't mind, walk us through that process a bit, because right now you're talking, obviously, people that are operators that may or may not be looking for exit, but obviously they want to increase their NOI. So as you were building up this portfolio, what were the key things you were focused on as an operator? And then how did you set it up to say, hey, let's now package this together and get a nice premium on the cap rate?
Yeah, I think the first thing is I've always spent a lot of time in the individual revenue lines of our property, not the, should this site do $1.25? Well, that depends on your unit mix, your offerings, what's inside, what's outside, what's your average size. Not every site's the same. And so we've always really taken an approach of dropping our entire rent roll into Excel and sorting them and kind of drafting charts of kind of where the opportunity is, what our competitors are doing, what we think we can raise over time. And so that was always the thought of not listening to somebody telling me, hey, this is a $2 market. I don't know what that means. If you have all 10 by 30s, you're not going to get the same rate as someone who's got an average size of 50 square feet. And so really being involved in the day-to-day, and to this day, 25 years later, I'm still very involved in the revenue at Trojan Storage. I still compile all of the rent rolls with my groups, and we go through every line item every month. And that's what really allowed us to address, like, first, what's the operator doing wrong? Where are they making their mistake? We bought one in the San Fernando Valley in 2010, and I remember the first thing we did, it was on the 5 freeway, but all the trees of the freeway covered the signage, covered the building. I know it sounds crazy, but we went to Caltrans, we got a permit, paid $10,000 to cut their trees down, and the occupancy went from 75 to 85 in a month. And it was just all of a sudden everyone knew we were there because we were kind of in this little neighborhood, but it was hard to get to, but it was on the freeway. And that was a property that we identified as the occupancy problem was just ownership had no idea what they were doing. They didn't have a real website. They didn't, back in 2010, we used Craigslist to advertise storage units, right? It was free. It just took your manager posting every day. And so we always would identify what we thought they were doing wrong and why they weren't achieving market rents. And by the way, sometimes it was just they didn't care. We bought a site in Colorado Springs in 2013, and the owners, they never learned how to raise their price in their software. So they had it for 10 years and they were charging the same 50 cents a foot when I bought it. Now they were 99% occupied, but they literally never gave a rent increase in 10 years and never even put their market rate up. And so when you find an opportunity like that, then your biggest thing is, what can I do with it, right? Like, it's not unlimited. I can't charge $3 a foot, but if I can take something that's doing 50 cents and turn it into $1.30, $1.40, right? We really increased the net income and therefore the EBIT and the value. And that's always what we went after in the first phase of Trojan Storage, was really value add properties. Occasionally we'd add a building to it, take land that wasn't really being utilized well. But our money was always made on the buy of understanding what their operational problems were and how we can fix it. And we've never really targeted, what we always call bond deals where something's, 98% occupied or 95% occupied at market rent rates. That's just not for us. We want to add value.
That is one more question. I'll give you the floor, my friend. So you talk about diving in these Excel docs and the revenue piece. I mean, are you kind of did you discover you're sort of a Rain Man with Excel docs, or is it something you've really had to work on to get good at?
I always joke for me, I think sometimes I can barely read. Numbers have always made sense. And so I can read through numbers and remember them pretty good. But I think the biggest thing was trying to find like the puzzle piece of what makes sense and what doesn't, right? And the interesting thing about numbers is I think sometimes people kind of skip through them really quickly and they just find the pieces. I've always told people you got to read the whole report, even if it's numbers, because the more you read it, the more you ingest it, the more you learn it. And you get to a place where you could say, well, I know my Burbank site's at 95%. I know I'm making $349 a foot. I know Commerce is at, $206 a foot at 88%, right? Because you're into it all the time. So you're not actually having to go to your reports to find stuff. You're living it. And when you live things, you remember them. And that's why I always tell people as they go through, numbers specifically, if you don't really dive into them and consistently do them, then you're always starting over. And so I think that's been something that's always been very helpful for me is living in those numbers.
That is.
I'm so interested you talked about wanting to be a developer at the beginning and kind of realizing you were an operational person, but we had a conversation off camera about how valuable that operational knowledge becomes. Listen, as somebody who's trying to find sites that work for development without the rent rolls that you have access to, you said it, we're always kind of guessing. How valuable has that time you're spent in your Excel spreadsheets and your rent roll with the 50,000 units Trojan Storage has, how valuable has that been when it becomes time to make multi-million-dollar decisions on potential development deals?
It's everything, because as you see phases in storage, like everything, right? Rates change, strategies change. And at the end of the day, just because someone's offering a 10 by 10 on their website, or some developer, finds something where, well, this guy's doing $2 a foot there, I'm going to do that. That's not reality. Reality is each building operates a lot differently. And so when you get to look at stuff over time and you get to see how it changes and how it grows, it makes you more effective, because you're no longer looking at what is Extra Space and Public Storage, who change their rates all the time, or the site around the corner doing. You're looking at stuff that you have and you've watched it grow over 6 or 7 years. These sites are not homogeneous. They're not all the same, right? Like a site in North Hollywood is very different from a site in Calabasas or Camarillo or San Jose. And where the customers come from, how they value things, what they're looking for. It's very different. And so, you know, for us, the most successful developments we've done have been in areas that we've been in for 10 years, right? Because you aren't guessing. And when someone brings me a project and they say, hey, this site in this tertiary area of Washington is going to make $1.80 because this guy's asking that, I usually look at them and say, I think you're going to have a problem. And fundamentally, I think, you know, there's a lot of buildings in Las Vegas right now that are for sale as COs or in lease ups that I think they're in real problems because I think people took real little snippets of 2021, 22, and they said, oh, Vegas is $3 a foot market. It's just not. And there may be little pockets that do really well, but if that's your data set of very uninformed web rate asking prices, or even trying to pull through radius sometimes, like that's not living it. That's not really showing you what your customer base has done. And I think that's why outside groups start sometimes have some problems when they, I feel like, are guessing in development.
So Brett, this is fascinating. You went to USC, born and raised in SoCal, so you do know this area really, really well. Your portfolio now, I know you've got some assets in New Jersey. You just recently acquired one in Arizona. So what was it about those assets? Again, not being in an area like you just mentioned, you've been around for 10 years. Did you just have such margin of safety in those assets that you felt good pulling the trigger? What was it about them said, hey, we're comfortable, let's go deploy some capital here?
Yeah, I think comfortability of basis, you know, I think for us, a lot of the money's made on the buy, right? And so the site I bought in Phoenix, you know, we bought at $128 a foot. I couldn't build it at that. And so for us, we looked and said, hey, what's the risk reward here? The risk is I don't do that much better and I make a little bit of money. But I think we're at a low point in storage. I think next year, I thought this year was pretty good relatively. I think the next few years will start to normalize with demand. And we thought that the opportunity cost on that building was great because we bought it, you know, for $3 million less than the owners have sold it to me. Looking at other projects like in the New Jersey ones, yeah, those were a little bit more challenging for us. But again, our basis was so low because we built them that we felt like, you know, we always go through and say, hey, what's the best case? What's the worst case? And so those stuff, we've never really been wrong so far of, you know, as long as I can do this amount, I'm going to be okay. And then if I do my best case scenario, my middle case, am I really doing really good? And that's kind of how we look at that as opportunity cost of that spread, which is why I know it sounds crazy. Sometimes we actually go and develop into markets as long as our basis is going to be reasonable. We don't think we'll be under that in any bad times.
You've kind of answered this. Go ahead, Thaddeus. You have something?
Go ahead.
You've kind of answered this, Brett, but I think a lot of us in development are just looking for some hope because it has been a rough couple of years. So you just said, hey, Chris, I'm buried in these numbers. I feel pretty good about 25. So Nick Walker from CBRE said, hey, I think the low was October of 2024. One, you concur with that. And because you're eating, breathing, and sleeping these numbers, do you think we're starting to be back on the rise? You still have some hesitation around that?
No, I think Nick's right. You know, when I look at, you know, we plot out every single unit and go through everyone, and we just did this exercise for our budgeting. And when I look at the charts of our 10 by 10s, our 5 by 10s, and our 10 by 20s, you know, obviously you see this real high point of 21, 22 where your basis is, and you kind of see this start to tick down where you've been renting units. The middle of this year, we started to see back towards 2022 and 2021. Now, that's probably 80% of our sites. We still have some sites that are either in lease up or maybe in an area that's still impacted a little bit. But the protection of some of our sites in the Los Angeles and San Jose, where demand strong populations are 6, 7, 800,000 in 5 miles, you know, that kind of insulates you a little bit from that. But I agree. I think I'm going to have 5 or 6% same store revenue growth this year. I think it'll be better next year. And by the way, October was a fantastic month. And I think I heard that from a lot of different operators. And really, you know, I don't think home sales are the end all be all for us, but I think you're going to start to see that start to move again, right? Because people are going to start moving again. It just, you can't just stay.
Yeah.
And so I completely agree with Nick that October was the worst of 24.
So you've been in operations now for quite some time. And then at one point in 2021, you're like, I think I can do this better. So you go and essentially buy QuikStor. So
Yeah.
what were the major pain points as an operator that had you go, you know what, I'm going to go, because you spent, I think this is public, but millions of dollars
Yeah.
on this entity, right? So you're making a major investment rather than just going, hey, life's good. I just sold a portfolio for 245 million. What had the pain be so much? You're like, man, I got to go do this. I know I can do it better, and I'm willing to spend some capital to do it.
You know, the good part about painful times, it makes you kind of reflect on challenges that you're having, right? If everything is just good all the time, you don't learn any lessons. And COVID, sitting at home and watching our operations team struggle because of all the antiquated ways we were doing things and treating things, and managers going down to the post office to mail lien letters, and all just the grind of what we're doing, and people sitting around in an office just hoping someone comes in to rent a unit. That really made us face that we needed to evolve, or we were going to be swallowed up by the REITs and everybody who got bigger. And the challenge really became that the pain point of my managers, my revenue staff, my operations people, watching them click buttons and go 30 seconds before the next page loads, watching people pull reports for 45 minutes to an hour and a half and then having them just fail, right? Like, those things made us realize that we were spending all this time working through a system that had all these band-aids, and like, we were just had all these workarounds to try to make our job work, and everyone accepted it. And so we have a CTO that's built and sold to technology companies that had been working with us for a while, and we really started thinking like we needed to build our own software just for us, candidly. Dennis Levitt, who owned QuikStor, is still a partner. We used their desktop version for 15 years before the sale, which was really best in business. It was fast. It was reliable. He reached out and said, "Hey, I'm ready to take a smaller role. I'd like to see QuikStor move forward." And we spent a while talking about how to kind of leverage their reliability and kind of their thought and put it into a truly decentralized architecture, so that we could have fast, reliable reports, but also that we could have a system that we could learn and grow with as we wanted to change our operations to a much more automated system.
So how many assets are you running on QuikStor right now within Trojan, and what's been the biggest benefit that you've seen by utilizing QuikStor for you and your business?
Yeah, so we fully launched QuikStor into 3 sites about 14 months ago, and then in April, May, we brought everybody else on. So we have 54 of all of my sites now, which is, by the way, my biggest asset. Yes, we put, John and I use no institutional capital. We've never used any private equity money. We don't need it. So we've invested, $4 or $5 million of our own money into QuikStor to make this work. So we have all of our stuff now on QuikStor. The biggest value for us, right, is the first self-storage I built. When I was done with it, I realized all the mistakes I made. And the challenge with anything that you build is you start to be like, well, this is backwards. Okay, this automation doesn't make sense to me. I want to do it this way. And we were never going to get any of that help from any other software company. And the one we were using, which has become this big private equity thing, right? In some ways, they're going backwards. They're no longer giving you like live action reports. You have to print yesterday's report if you want an occupancy report. You need yesterday's management summary. In 2025, you can't get live data out of the biggest software that exists. And so for us, we knew that if we couldn't control the development pattern of it, we couldn't start truly automating the delinquency process, centralizing our call centers, centralizing our operations, no longer having one manager sit and wait for hoping someone comes in or someone calls. We want to centralize operations, make it so customers can like even kiosks and stuff, which I think have a value, but like people's phones do everything they need. And so by setting up our offices to go through and rent units whenever we want them, we've invested millions of dollars in a no key. We've done lots of open tech blocks. We've tried all kinds of different technologies that are starting to be successful for us, where it's one thing to unman a 15,000 square foot storage facility. But when you unman a 90,000 self-storage facility that's making $350 a foot, you're starting to really find success. But you can't unman it if you're not staying with high occupancy and high rates. And so QuikStor's allowed us to have lightning fast reports. It's allowed us to to go through and re-examine how we're doing auctions, how we're doing all the daily tasks that just take our people lots of time. And that's been the biggest benefit to Trojan, including my operations people who now can, when they look at our revenue stuff, they pull directly from QuikStor and they can do it in 6 seconds, not 4 hours, right? But those things matter as you're starting to get into these conversations. And then, for the things we want to build from pricing, from different stuff, it's allowing us to really ingest AI in a true way, not just ChatGPT stuff, but like let AI start to make correlations that maybe we don't think about. Is pricing based? If you have a customer that comes to you, 10 times a month and lives a mile away, is he less price sensitive than the customer that comes 3 times a month but lives 6 miles away, right? And maybe has different choices. And so we want to start using that to correlate things that are happening. And that's why we're just at the beginning of this journey. And as we start to onboard operators, we've got a couple hundred using QuikStor, but we're really going to be start to onboard the bigger clients, the 20, 30, 40 site properties in the first quarter. They're going to see just a massive benefit because my whole desire of this is my properties, of how can I make them more efficient, more valuable, run better, less employee, like all the different things that we want. And we're all aligned with that. We're just not a software company. We're a storage company.
So let's say right now that I'm watching this, I own 20 assets. Speak directly to me. Like, why would I want to transfer all my assets onto QuikStor? What's going to happen in my business?
Well, the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a scalable solution that is going to allow you to have the information that you need quick, fast. Your people are going to be able to utilize it. You're going to start to see automations that are meaningful. And a quick example would be, with 54 sites, when we want to make a change in our lease for California, we've got to go to every single site database, individually make that change. At QuikStor, we've made it where load the California lease, have it enter the information for each site that you want, and you're done instantly. And that way you start to have control. You're not worried that someone didn't update one of the leases, or you have a checklist just to update leases. Same thing with discounts. Same thing with, we were joking earlier that occasionally you have a customer that's known in the industry that moves in, never pays you, stays 16 months, is a big legal fight. Our database is searchable for Trojan Storage, that I could put your name in and see if you are renting at any of my 54 locations, right? And so we're able to then tie that if there's a bad renter we don't want in LA, we can populate that into our system today so no one rents to them, right? Not call up 12 locations like, by the way, put up Chris Berg. We don't want Chris Berg to rent, right? And so our supervisors are able to go in and make changes at the corporate level. They don't have to open up all these individual sites. And that's the framework. And as it grows, when we release our auction manager in the first quarter, which, when you talk about trial and error, that's what my internal operations team has been saying, which is, hey, here's the challenges we have. Here's all the letters we're printing. Here's all the steps we need to do. We have to post this auction ad. We have to do this. Well, our developer said, okay, great. Let's go through each one of those steps. When do you want to contact people? When do you want to send emails? How do you want to do the liens? We're working with, California's got this ridiculous rule that if you send an email, you have to prove they open it for the auction letters. Well, our system is going to do 3 or 4 different things to try to proof that. And if we can prove it, we then can just email it, save the certificate of mailing, which, we send thousands of those at $3 a piece, right? And then if it doesn't approve it, then the system knows, okay, now just print the lien letter and move on, right? And so the goal is, someone's got to inventory the space. Someone's got to do that step, right? My system can't do that, but my system can do everything else right away and at a corporate level so that people can spend their time on revenue stuff, not just how we evict people, right? And so those are the things that an operator from a pain point, especially the guys with 30 and 40 and 50 sites, they're not individual little programs that you're constantly going in and out of. It's one big program.
The thing that really jumped out to me when we spoke earlier this week was, I'm going to call it the network effect. If you've got a better name, great. But the fact is that if I bring my assets onto QuikStor, I'm not just benefiting from my own 20 or 50 assets. I'm benefiting from every asset that's on QuikStor because of the computer learning algorithms you guys have got in the system. Like, help draw that out some more so I can go, oh, wow, that's a great leverage tool for my assets.
And I think I think there's all these little things that happen in storage where people say, well, listen, it takes 36 months to lease up a new building, right? There's all these things we use, but like, what's the truth of it? How long do your customers really last? How long do they stay? Who's got the highest correlation of price sensitivity? At what point do you have groups that say, like, this is someone I can really continue to give rent increases, and this is someone I can't? And then on the flip side of that, like, we're now looking at some of our buildings saying, listen, we can't afford to have these customers anymore, right? Because they're saying such a low rent. We actually have to make them have a decision of like, they either need to pay what we think's market, or we need to refill it with someone who's paying market. So the beauty is, as the system starts to kind of find these correlations for us, then we can give you real data about your site and say, listen, this is somebody, this is a product where you've got a much longer stay and people are less sensitive to increases. But also, by the way, we want to make sure you're factoring your auto debits, where they live, how far they are, are they in a house, are they in an apartment? Like let's take real data and start correlating it for each site to then give you information of what your goal is. Listen, I know operators who tell me, Brett, I'm super happy if I get 4% a year. I don't want to grind my customers. I want to stay 97% full. I want 4% increases a year. I'm happy. Okay, great, do that.
Yeah.
And then there's some of us who say, like, we used to joke, I'd rather have 40% growth in year one and 1% for the next 3 years than do that 40% over those 6 years. I'd rather have all the cash now. So everyone wants to operate differently. Our goal is to provide you real data and real insights into your product so you can effectively make decisions the way you want to make them without spending hours and hours and hours for waiting for reports to load.
Thaddeus, I mean, I'm intrigued. So you can tell I'm taking a lot of the floor, but the floor is yours, my friend.
I think the one question I wanted to ask, you mentioned Extra Space in Public earlier, and we've seen the velocity of consolidation that's happened in storage. I got into the industry in 2021. I've, just over 4 years I've been here, and it's been amazing to see how quickly, and if it's not Public Storage and Extra Space, it's massive private equity groups that are buying, 50, 60, 80, 100 stores at a time. How important now is it for operators that they have this ability to really be at the forefront, and how is QuikStor answering that issue?
Yeah, and I think it's such a fascinating question because you sit there and say, like, I can't compete with the REITs anymore. In some ways, I actually, like, the growth of Extra Space has been obviously phenomenal, but like you can see some of the disjointedness in what's going on with even the strategies that all of us really don't like of how they've handled their pricing. You need to be able to have real data at your fingertips to compete with those guys. You got to know where your pain points are. You've got to understand where your customers are coming from, how long they're staying. You need managers that are efficient. You need customers that can easily pay their rent, that easily can rent units. And I don't think the solution is going to be that we have 2 big REITs or 3 big REITs that run 50,000 storage facilities. I don't think that's realistic. And I think you're actually seeing some of the damage of everyone kind of rushing their developments into some of those third-party sites, thinking they're gonna be the best. Because I'll tell you, like, if I'm Extra Space, and I don't know this for sure, I would think they're spending more time worried about the sites they own than the sites they manage, right? I just think that's human nature and selfish. And so I think you're going to see more groups. Like, we don't do a lot of third-party management, but U.S. Storage does a great job. Drew Hoven's company and Charles, they do a really good job running self-storage facilities. StoreQuest does a good job running storage facilities. I think you're going to see more and more, regional guys come in that have an expertise in their area and understand the customers and understand the basis than some, just kind of big REIT that's coming through. And so if you're going to compete with them, you better know what it's costing you to acquire customers. That's been a big, we deal. Trojan Storage is handled by GoLocal. We've been working with them a lot over the last probably year and a half of, like, how do we know where the funnel is, right? When someone clicks an ad, I don't want them to get lost in my software. I want transparency. And it's funny because you would think some of these marketing companies, well, we did this many clicks, pay us. But GoLocal said, well, yeah, we agree with you. We want to find where they're dropping off, how far they're getting, why they're dropping off. Can we find differences between pricing? Can we start to give you some idea that, hey, the standard for us is we have, a 5% click-through ratio to rentals, but this property is doing 2%. Here's what we think the problems are, right? And so if you don't run your properties every day, and you don't have the data and you don't have the ability, then you should go to third-party management of the REITs and let them do it. But I don't think that's a solution. I think we're going to be better off not being like the rent control bill here in California. People can say whatever they want about it, but like the factor of renting units at $60 and giving people $50 rent increases every 4 months factored into it. I don't care what anybody says. And I think we want better opportunity and more innovation and more competition. And I think that's why we're doing this.
That's also why we wanted you to join us, and obviously ecstatic that QuikStor has agreed to be the title sponsor of the self-storage report. But we, on a fundamental level, and we talked about this when I had you on the Stories Behind the Door podcast almost a year ago, the thesis behind why you're doing this makes a ton of sense for what's going on in storage now. So really excited that you've agreed to be a part with us. We put this logo up just for you. We got the Trojan Storage facility with the QuikStor logo over it. So if you're watching and you want more information on QuikStor, you can go to the link there at QuikStor.com. Brett Henry has an amazing team behind him as well. He might not be the person that answers your query, but he's got a great group of folks behind the scenes there, and really looking forward, Brett, to see where this journey goes. I know you guys have been using this almost exclusively in-house for the last year as you work the kinks out and build something. I like to refer to it as the Italian supercar of storage software management, something that under the hood is just performing at a really high level, and looking forward to this, getting out to other industry operators as well.
Appreciate that very, very much.
Yeah. So Brett, just want to give you the last word. Anything else you want to add or share that we haven't asked you about?
No, I think for us, right, the beauty of self-storage 10 years ago was everyone really kind of moving stuff forward, being innovative and not being stuck in a corner of one group, right? And I think with Storable and the REITs and some different stuff, it feels like there's this big consolidation of power into some groups. And I think we're starting to see the turning point of that. I think we're seeing some other softwares that are coming out. I think we're seeing, other managers really getting a better base of regional operators. And so, I'm excited to see storage kind of go back to more competition and innovation over the next 5 or 10 years and less of the other. So, no, I appreciate the time that you guys have and working with you, and look forward to moving this forward.
Brett, we normally don't do this, but you just added so much value today. I'm going to do this anyways, and then we'll see how Thad responds. But Thaddeus, my question to you, and I'll share first, is what was your greatest takeaway from today? And I want to share with you, Brett, thank you, because by you talking about, hey, Chris, I'm in these rent rolls every day, just continues to speak to me about the detail that it takes to actually have massive success in an industry, paying attention to those details. And I think the consistency too, like you doing that every day, it begins to compound just like a great stock or like your great assets that you own, right? And so it just really hits home what I think I'm working on as a human being every day to get better. But to hear you kind of just talk about it, just reminds me like every day, compound, consistency, you're going to get better. So that was my biggest takeaway. Thaddeus, there was so much good content, but what about for you?
Yeah, I go back to a book, Ready, Fire, Aim, I think was the book that they said inch wide, mile deep. And when you listen to Brett, that's what you get, right? It's like, hey, be really, really, really good at one aspect of it. And interestingly, this is something from my martial arts career, right? Do one kick 10,000 times. Don't do 10,000 kicks one time. And I think that theory comes out over and over again. And who better to be the person that you're getting your operating software from than the guy who really understands operationally what's the important information to know. I think that was by far my biggest takeaway.
Yeah. So thank you, Brett, for the impact info, man. Appreciate you. Again, check them out, QuikStor.com. I'm Chris Berg, Thaddeus Campbell, Brett Henry. Have a blessed day. We'll see you back here next week.